It's funny, the things you choose to ignore for a friend. As an event planner, my entire career is built on noticing the details other people miss. The slightly crooked centerpiece, the lighting that's a shade too cool, the subtle tension between the mother of the bride and her new son-in-law. My job is to see the truth of a room and bend it toward perfection. But for 20 years, when it came to my best friend, Colette, I had chosen to be blind. Looking back, the signs were all there, scattered like expensive party favors, long before that day at the Greenwich Country Club. The baby shower was my masterpiece. The theme was A Star is Born, executed in a palette of lavender, cream, and starlight silver. Hundreds of lavender balloons bobbed against the vaulted ceilings of the club's main hall, their strings glittering like stardust. I had overseen every detail, from the custom mocktails served in crystal flutes to the string quartet playing modern lullabies. It was opulent, over the top, and exactly what Colette had demanded. This wasn't just a party, it was a statement. A declaration that Colette and her husband Alistair were about to produce the first grandchild for the ailing Prescott family patriarch, a feat that came with a multi-million-dollar inheritance. I was fixing a floral arrangement near the grand entrance, a cascade of lavender roses and silver-dusted eucalyptus when I first heard it. Colette and Alistair were tucked away in a small alcove, their backs to me. Their voices were hushed, but sharp with a panic that didn't belong at a party. "It doesn't matter what the timeline says," Alistair hissed. "We just have to beat Isla to the finish line." "And what if she shows up?" Colette's voice was thin, brittle. "What if she comes today?" "It's too soon, Alistair. The plan isn't ready." "Then make it ready," he snapped, just as he caught my eye in the reflection of a silver ice bucket. He fell silent instantly. Colette turned, her face rearranging itself into a beatific smile, her hands flying to her perfectly round 8 months pregnant belly. "Chloe, darling," she chirped, "isn't it all just magical? You've outdone yourself." I smiled back, a practiced professional reflex. "Only the best for you," I said, but my pulse wasn't steady. It was a strange, discordant note in an otherwise perfect symphony. This was the latest in a long series of oddities. The rush orders for newborn-sized clothing when the baby wasn't due until late summer. The way Colette insisted on a specific brand of French mineral water, not because of pregnancy cravings, but because she claimed her doctor said the mineral composition was critical, a detail that felt more like a line from a script than a real medical concern. For months, I had made excuses for her, just like I always had. In college, when she'd accidentally submitted my term paper as her own, she'd cried and said the stress of midterms had scrambled her brain. I had let it go. When she'd forgotten to pay me back for a flight to her destination wedding in Bali, she'd claimed the chaos of planning had made her forgetful. I had waved it off. Each incident was a small cut, a tiny tear in the fabric of our friendship that I had dutifully, loyally stitched back together. I told myself it was just Colette being Colette. She lived her life like a performance, and I was her trusted, behind-the-scenes stage manager. The inciting incident, the moment the entire stage collapsed, happened an hour into the party. Colette had managed to spill a drop of raspberry puree on her custom lavender gown. "A disaster!" she'd wailed, with a theatricality that earned her a wave of sympathetic coos from her audience of wealthy friends and relatives. I whisked her away to the private bridal suite the club had provided for her to change into her second outfit. "I feel so huge and clumsy," she sighed, sinking onto a velvet chaise lounge. "Help me with this zipper, would you, Chloe? I can't reach." As I unzipped the gown, she turned to fuss with her hair in the vanity mirror. "Could you grab the silver heels from my suitcase? They're in the dust bag." I knelt and opened the gleaming Louis Vuitton luggage. Inside, nestled amongst layers of tissue paper, was a pair of silver Jimmy Choos. As I reached for the shoe bag, my fingers brushed against something else. Something cool, smooth and oddly heavy. It was a silicone material, flesh-toned, with an intricate system of straps and clasps. My blood ran cold. I pulled it out just enough to see what it was. A state-of-the-art, hyper-realistic prosthetic pregnancy belly. My pulse wasn't racing, not exactly. It was something worse. It was a complete and utter stillness, as if my entire circulatory system had frozen in place. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't a Colette being Colette moment. This was quiet, undeniable proof of a monstrous, elaborate lie. I felt the air thin around me. My meticulously planned party, the lavender balloons, the string quartet, it was all a set, a stage for a fraud. I quickly tucked the prosthetic back under the tissue paper, my hands numb, and grabbed the shoes. "Here you go," I said, my voice sounding distant and strange to my own ears. I needed to know if he was in on it. After Colette was preened and redressed, making her grand re-entrance to another round of applause, I found Alistair by the champagne fountain. My heart was a cold, hard knot in my chest, but my face was a mask of professional calm. I held my event tablet like a shield. "Alistair," I said, keeping my tone light. "A quick logistical question. I need the name of Colette's obstetrician to finalize the insurance paperwork for the event. The club requires it for liability." It was a lie, but a plausible one. He didn't look at me. His eyes darted around the room, landing on everyone but me. He took a long sip of his champagne. "Colette has all that handled, Chloe," he said, his voice clipped and dismissive. "She has a whole team for that stuff. Let's not bother her with the details today." He stayed quiet after that. And in that quiet, I heard everything I needed to. His refusal wasn't just evasive, it was a denial of my right to even ask the question. It confirmed his complicity. It confirmed that I was utterly, terrifyingly alone in this discovery. I excused myself and walked out onto a secluded stone balcony overlooking the 18th green. The manicured perfection of the golf course seemed to mock me. I had built this perfect day, this beautiful lie, with my own two hands. My competence, my loyalty, my friendship. It had all been weaponized against me, against everyone in that room. The emotional dam didn't break with a flood of tears. There was no room for that. Instead, it was replaced by a chilling stillness, a cold, hard clarity. My shock crystallized into a single quiet decision. I would not cause a scene. I would not tear down the stage I had so carefully built. Not yet. I needed to understand the scope of the play, the roles of all the actors, before I brought down the final curtain. I looked down at the lavender and cream spectacle, at my best friend cradling a lie, and I made a silent vow. My final thought was not one of rage, but of cold, sharp intent. Let the party go on. Returning to the main hall was like stepping back onto a stage after discovering the play is a tragedy, not the comedy you've been rehearsing. The lavender and silver decorations I had so carefully selected now seemed garish, a cheap facade for a rotten core. My smile felt like a costume, but it was one I had to wear. My shock from the discovery on the balcony hadn't faded. It had hardened into something else. A cold, quiet resolve. My objective had changed. I was no longer the event planner. I was the investigator. My tablet, usually my tool for managing timelines and vendors, became my investigation board. I retreated to a quiet corner near the string quartet, the soaring notes of a familiar lullaby sounding almost mournful. With a few taps, I pulled up the invoices for the event. There it was, in black and white. Receipt after receipt for rush orders. A hand-carved crib from Italy, delivered by air freight. A collection of newborn-sized designer onesies, overnighted from Paris. A custom monogrammed silver rattle, fabricated in just 3 days at triple the normal cost. It was all inconsistent with Colette's supposed late summer due date. It was the planning of a woman who didn't have months to spare. It was the planning of a woman in a desperate hurry. I needed to understand the motive. I needed to understand the why. I spotted Alistair's aunt, a formidable woman named Beatrice, complaining to another guest about the strength of the mimosas. I approached with a plate of canapés and a practiced, professional smile. "Beatrice," Everything to your liking? I asked. Oh, Chloe, wonderful, as always, she said, taking a crab puff. It's all just so much. But I suppose with Arthur's condition, they feel the need to celebrate while they can. He's putting so much pressure on them, you know. I feigned ignorance. Pressure? She leaned in conspiratorially, her voice dropping. His ridiculous inheritance clause. The first grandchild to carry the Prescott name gets the entire estate, free and clear. My nephew Alistair, or his sister Isla. It's a dreadful race, really. Terribly old-fashioned. And with Isla due any day now, well... She gestured toward Colette across the room. It seems Colette has won. A blessing, truly. There it was. The why. A baby race. The entire extravagant event, I realized, wasn't just a celebration. It was an announcement of victory. It was an alibi, crafted in lavender and silver. While I was processing this, Colette took center stage. She stood beside a mountain of pastel-wrapped gifts, her hand resting on the prosthetic belly, her face a perfect portrait of maternal joy. The room fell silent. I just wanted to thank you all for being here, she began, her voice catching with practiced emotion. This journey to motherhood has been a true miracle, to feel this life growing inside me. It's a blessing Alistair and I will never take for granted. She looked at her husband, who watched her with a tense, adoring expression. We can't wait to welcome our little one into this wonderful family. It was a masterclass in manipulation, and I had provided the stage. My internal monologue, which for years had been a chorus of excuses for her, was now a prosecutor's cross-examination. I thought of all the times I'd brushed off her dramatic flair as a personality quirk. I now saw it as a well-honed weapon. The hurt of the personal betrayal was still there, a cold stone in my stomach. But it was being eclipsed by a quiet, professional fury. How did I let her use me like this? How could I have been so blind? I wasn't just her friend. I was her most valuable asset. The one person whose competence and loyalty she could count on to build the most beautiful, believable lie. The climax of my quiet investigation, the moment my theory became irrefutable fact, arrived in the form of a person. The double doors of the hall swung open, and a woman walked in. She was beautiful, with the same dark hair as Alistair, and she was radiantly, genuinely, and very, very pregnant. Her belly was low and full, and she moved with the heavy, graceful slowness of a woman in her final trimester. A hush fell over the room as Alistair's mother rushed to greet her. Isla! Darling, we didn't think you'd make it. Isla. I watched Colette's face. Her beatific smile froze, cracking at the edges. Her hand, the one not cradling her lie, clenched into a fist at her side. I saw her eyes dart to Alistair, and in that split-second glance I saw it all. Pure, undiluted panic. He looked back at her, his expression a mirror of her own terror. Isla was the smoking gun. Her very presence in the room was the final damning piece of evidence. She was the deadline. She was the reason for the rush orders, the frantic conversations, the desperate, high-stakes performance. Colette didn't just have to be pregnant. She had to give birth first. And standing there, watching my best friend look at her rival, I understood with chilling clarity that Colette's plan, whatever it was, had just been dangerously accelerated. My final thought, as Isla walked toward us, her hand on her own, very real belly, was no longer a question. It was a certainty. This was never about a baby. It was about a deadline. And the deadline just walked in. The arrival of Isla changed the air in the room. It was like a drop in barometric pressure before a storm. The guests, sensing a new dynamic, began to subtly compare the two expectant mothers. Isla, glowing and serene, accepting congratulations with a quiet, genuine joy. And Colette, suddenly brittle, her smiles a little too bright, her hand protectively, almost desperately, clutching her perfect, fraudulent belly. The party I had designed as a coronation was now a silent, tense tale of two pregnancies, I could see the panic behind Alistair's eyes as he fetched his sister a glass of water. The deadline had arrived, and their performance was about to be called. They waited until the gift-opening ceremony, the moment when all attention was once again focused solely on Colette. She was seated in a large, throne-like wicker chair, surrounded by a mountain of gifts. She had just unwrapped a Tiffany silver cup from Alistair's aunt when she let out the first soft gasp. It was barely audible, but in the expectant hush of the room, it landed like a firecracker. "Colette? Darling, are you all right?" her mother asked, leaning forward. Colette gave a weak, dismissive wave. "I'm fine, just a little twinge." She tried to open another gift, her hands trembling slightly. Then came a sharper intake of breath. She closed her eyes, her knuckles white as she gripped the arms of the chair. This, I knew, was the bait. This was the opening act of her endgame. She was digging her own grave with the precision of a master dramatist. Alistair rushed to her side, his face a perfect mask of husbandly concern. "What is it? Is it the baby?" "It's too soon," Colette moaned, just loud enough for the first few rows of guests to hear. The whispers started immediately, a ripple of alarm spreading through the crowd. Then she let out a cry, a full-throated sound of pain that was utterly convincing. "Alistair, I think it's happening." Chaos erupted. People stood up, their faces a mixture of shock and concern. Alistair, a pillar of frantic energy, shouted, "Someone call 911, my wife is in labor." In that moment, I had a choice. I could stand by and watch the lie escalate into a full-blown medical fraud with paramedics and hospital trips. I could scream the truth and turn the party into a public crucifixion. Or I could do what an event planner does, manage the crisis. As the crowd surged forward to surround Colette, creating a wall of panicked guests, I saw my opening. I moved against the tide, my steps calm and deliberate. I reached her side just as Alistair was pretending to comfort her. "I'll take her to the powder room," I said, my voice cutting through her theatrical moans with a quiet authority that surprised even myself. "Give her some privacy before the paramedics arrive." Before Alistair could object, I took Colette's arm. Her skin was cold. I half led, half pulled her away from the throne, through the gawking crowd, and into the quiet marble and lavender sanctuary of the ladies' powder room. I clicked the heavy door shut, and the sounds of the party's chaos dimmed to a distant hum. She leaned against the sink, her act still running on fumes. "Chloe, I think I need to lie down." "Stop it, Colette." My voice was low, steady, and utterly devoid of the sympathy she was accustomed to. She froze, her eyes widening. The performance faltered. "What?" she whispered. "The performance is over," I said, taking a step toward her. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. The truth was my weapon. I found the belly. The color drained from her face. It was a sight to behold. The vibrant, glowing mother-to-be vanished, replaced by a pale, cornered stranger. Her hand, which had been protectively cradling her abdomen, dropped to her side as if the phantom limb had been amputated. I don't know what you're talking about," she stammered, but the lie was weak, flimsy. "Don't you?" I continued, my voice as cold and hard as the marble counter she was leaning against. I laid out the facts with the precision of a final invoice. "I know about the inheritance race, Colette. I know about Isla. I know about the rush orders and the frantic timeline. I know this is all a lie." Her composure didn't just crack, it shattered. The meticulously constructed facade crumbled into dust, and for the first time in as long as I could remember, I was seeing the real Colette. She was not glamorous or charming. She was small and terrified and ugly with desperation. "You don't understand," she sobbed, real tears now carving paths through her expensive foundation. He was going to leave it all to her, to Isla's baby. It was mine first. It was supposed to be mine. Her confession, whispered between ragged breaths, was the true smoking gun. It was confirmation of a deception so profound, so audacious, It almost defied belief. Outside the door, I could hear the rising panic, Alistair's voice directing the imaginary crisis. Here, in this quiet room, the real crisis was reaching its climax. I held all the power. I could walk out that door and announce the truth to the world, to her family, to the paramedics who were likely on their way. I looked at the wreck of my oldest friend, at the pathetic, weeping heart of the lie, and I made my decision. I took a step back, giving her no comfort. My voice was quiet, but it was a death sentence to the narrative she had created. "You wanted this to be a spectacle," I said. "Now you have to face the consequences." I turned and walked out of the powder room, closing the door softly behind me, leaving Colette alone with her phantom pregnancy, her shattered performance, and the wail of approaching and very real sirens. I stepped out of the powder room into a scene of managed chaos. The paramedics had arrived, their calm professionalism a stark contrast to the manufactured panic of the party guests. I watched, my heart a cold, steady beat in my chest, as they loaded Colette onto a gurney. She kept her eyes closed, the consummate actress playing her part to the very end. Alistair, his face a mask of anguish, hovered beside her, promising everyone he would text with updates from the hospital. As they wheeled her out, a single lavender balloon detached from its weight and drifted slowly to the ceiling. The party was over. The aftermath was a flurry of hushed conversations and averted eyes. I did my job. I supervised my team as we dismantled the beautiful lie I had built. We packed away the silver rattles, boxed up the uneaten petite fours, and folded the lavender linens. Each action was a small, somber nail in the coffin of my friendship with Colette. The guests departed quickly, whispering amongst themselves, their minds full of a dramatic story that was entirely false. They were left with confusion. I was left with the sickening weight of the truth. The family image, so carefully curated and extravagantly displayed, had been shattered not by a loud explosion, but by the quiet implosion of its own deceit. The enabler's confession, as I now think of it, came the next morning. It wasn't a confession of guilt, but of desperation. My phone rang, and it was Alistair. I answered, my voice flat. "She lost the baby," he said, his voice ragged with what I assume was meant to sound like grief. "The doctors couldn't save it. It was too soon." The audacity of it, the commitment to extending the lie, left me breathless. "I see," I said. Silence stretched between us. "Listen, Chloe," he said, his tone shifting from grieving husband to desperate businessman. "I know you know. I don't know how, but I saw your face yesterday. You know?" I didn't respond. "Name your price," he said, the words tumbling out in a rush. "A partnership in your event business? I have investors who could take you global. Cash? Just tell me the number. We just need you to keep quiet, just until my father passes. For the family." His attempt to buy my silence was more damning than any apology. He wasn't sorry for the lie. He was sorry he'd been caught. He saw my integrity as a commodity, my friendship as something with a price tag. "There is no price, Alistair," I said, and the line went dead. My refusal wasn't a negotiation tactic. It was a verdict. The small alignment, the gesture that gave me the strength for what came next, arrived that afternoon. It was a phone call from a number I didn't recognize. "Chloe? It's Isla. Alistair's sister. The person this entire deception was designed to cheat." I braced myself for accusations, for questions I couldn't answer. "I just wanted to call," she said, her voice soft and hesitant. "I don't know what really happened yesterday. The doctors at the hospital seemed confused. But I wanted to thank you. In all that chaos, you were the only calm one. You felt like a true friend to this family." Tears pricked my eyes. This quiet validation, this misplaced gratitude from the one person with the most to lose, meant more than 20 years of Colette's performative friendship. It was a signpost, pointing me toward the right path no matter how difficult. That evening, I sat in my quiet, orderly apartment, a stark contrast to the chaotic splendor of the party. I realized the lie couldn't be left to fester. Colette and Alistair would create a new narrative, a tragic loss, a story of grief to garner even more sympathy. The truth would be buried forever, and the inheritance would likely end up contested in a bitter legal battle. The patriarch, the man whose legacy this was all about, deserved to know the truth before he died. This was the climax of my journey. Not a public confrontation, but a quiet, moral decision. I pulled up the contact information for the Prescott family's private nurse, a discreet woman I'd coordinated with for the patriarch's special dietary needs at the event. I took a deep breath, my finger hovering over the screen. This was the point of no return. I was no longer just an observer. I was about to become an agent of the reckoning. I pressed the button. "This is Chloe Morgan," I said when the nurse answered. "I was the planner for yesterday's event. I need to arrange a visit with Mr. Prescott. It's a matter of the utmost urgency regarding his family." The drive to the Prescott estate was long and quiet. The victory, I understood then, wasn't about exposing Colette. It wasn't about revenge. It was about taking the truth, this ugly, heavy thing, and delivering it to the one place where it could bring about a just resolution. Looking back, the silence in my car on the way to that estate was the first real peace I'd felt in months. I had made my decision. I was going to finish the story. The meeting with Arthur Prescott took place in his sun-drenched library, a room that smelled of old books and fading hydrangeas. He was frail, propped up against a mountain of pillows in a leather armchair, but his eyes were as sharp and clear as a winter sky. The nurse left us alone. I didn't present my evidence like a prosecutor. I simply sat, and in a calm, quiet voice, I told him the truth. I told him about the inheritance clause, the prosthetic, Isla's arrival, and the faked labor. I spoke without malice, without emotion, recounting the facts as I had observed them. When I was finished, he was silent for a long time, his gaze fixed on a portrait of his late wife. "My son is a fool," he finally whispered, his voice a dry rustle of leaves. "And that girl, she is a predator, dressed in pastels." He looked at me then, his eyes holding a deep, weary sadness. "Thank you, Miss Morgan. You have done this family a painful but necessary service." I left the Prescott estate that day feeling not triumphant, but clean. The weight of the secret had been lifted, the truth placed in the hands of the only person who could render a just verdict. Arthur Prescott passed away 2 weeks later. The reading of the revised will took place in a sterile, wood-paneled law office. I was there, at the specific request of the estate's executor. Alistair and Colette sat on one side of the mahogany table, looking pale and thin, their unity a brittle shard. Isla sat on the other, her newborn daughter sleeping peacefully in a carrier at her feet. The lawyer read the final testament in a dry monotone. The language was precise, cold, and devastating. It acknowledged Alistair as his son, but bequeathed to him only $1, so that it may never be said he was forgotten. The will then explicitly stated the reason: for his participation in a painful and calculated deception intended to subvert my true wishes. It went on to disinherit Colette entirely. The bulk of the Prescott fortune, the houses, the stocks, the tangible legacy, was to be placed into a trust for the benefit of his first and only true grandchild, Isla's daughter. The true legacy had been secured. I watched as Colette's face crumpled, not in grief, but in the final, ugly realization that her performance had earned her nothing. Alistair simply stared at the polished surface of the table, a man hollowed out by his own weakness. My new table, as I think of it, was a small, sunlit cafe a few weeks after that. Isla had asked to meet. She held her sleeping baby, her face soft with a gratitude that was almost overwhelming. "I wanted to thank you, Chloe," she said. "Not for the money, but for honoring my father. You gave him the chance to make things right. You gave our family the truth." We didn't talk about Colette. We talked about sleepless nights and the color to paint the nursery. We talked about the future. This new friendship, born not from years of shared history, but from a single difficult moment of shared integrity, felt more real than anything I'd had before. It was a foundation, not a facade. The final confrontation, the last echo from my old life, came a month later. It was an email from Colette, sent from an anonymous server, from a new life she had started as a social pariah in some European city. The message was a torrent of vitriol, blaming me, my jealousy, my perfect life, for her downfall. She called me a traitor, a monster, a snake. It was the last desperate monologue from an actress playing to an empty theater. I read the words, and what I felt was not anger, not hurt, but a profound and distant pity for a woman so lost in her own fiction she could no longer see the exit. Forgiveness isn't about absolving the other person. It's about revoking their power to hurt you. I dragged the email to the trash and emptied it, the digital bits of her rage vanishing into nothing. I had nothing left to say to her. The story ends here, not in a lawyer's office or a quiet cafe, but on a beautiful, sunlit veranda overlooking the ocean. I am in my element, clipboard in hand, overseeing the setup for a wedding. The bride and groom are laughing with their families, their joy unscripted and radiant. My team is arranging real flowers, hanging real lanterns, preparing for a celebration of something true. I watch them, and I reflect on the journey that brought me here, the power I wield as an architect of these moments. I understand the difference now, in my bones. The difference between a performance designed to deceive and a celebration built to honor. One is a stage, the other a foundation. My final thought as I signal for the music to begin is the quiet, settled truth of who I have become. Some people build a stage for a lie. I build foundations for the truth.